Hey, all right. Let's see if we can get everybody else going. Welcome to anybody who's watching. I'm going to send this out to our guest, Vonetta, see if we can bring her in on the game. See if she can click that from her computer. Let's see. Get everybody going. Nobody should be watching right now, but we'll see how this goes. I'll grab some water. You needing that later? All right, so we're going to do Brazil is not for beginners, and we're going to talk about a lot of different things with Vonetta Chantrice. She'll be on in a short moment. I'm just waiting for her to click in, and then I'm going to click an invite, and I'm going to bring in a bunch of different people from a few different places. We're going to see how this goes. So bear with me for 1 second. Few different places. Closing out all my other apps because you know what? Why have things in the background? Quit those. Quit those. Quit those. Let's see, where are you? We're going to go over a few things here, and I'm not even going to edit this out, by the way, and I'm going to reiterate this when she arrives. Vonetta's a professional nurse from the United States. She's been living in Brazil. She's going to introduce herself, and we're going to go over a few different topics. And we've got 4 major ones about healthcare and some of the crypto and some of the way business works. That's going to be a big one. She has her own YouTube channel, and what we're also going to do is bring up her YouTube channel, and I'll link that at the bottom. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to put it as a YouTube link or as a bit.ly link or something like that, but we'll find out. And oh, I think I see her. Let's see if she's in. And hey, where are you? Are you in there? For anyone who knows how YouTube works through Google Hangouts, the way it works is you send the people who you want to bring in with you, you send them the link. And what the link does is allows them to come into the video. And for the record, if anybody wants to make a comment about why don't I have a clever background or something like that, listen, this is just me. You come for the goods, you come for the content, you come for the conversations. If I don't have a clever background, that's okay. That's okay. I'm not going to be upset about it. It's going to be about what I talk to people about. It's like my writing on my main YusefWateef.com page. My page doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles, but I bring people in because what ends up happening is everybody likes the content, the things that we say. So let's see. Where is she? She is allegedly here, but I don't see you. Let's see. Where are you again? Invite. Let's see. Let's try it again. Click. That's interesting. Because she says she's in here, but you know what? Technology's fraught with problems. Oh, hey.
There it is. Sorry about that. There were a couple of more, because this is my first hangout. There were a couple of unexpected steps. So I'm like, oh my God. It wasn't the same as our check yesterday. Yesterday was just like, oh, click on a button. But today was like, give us some blood.
And you know what? Nobody will believe. We actually tested the system. We knew it worked. We knew the system worked. You know, and for some weird reason, it just refused to. Let's see.
I think we're free to go now. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Let's see.
Very good. So I'm going to treat you like the MC, and I'll like let you guide everything. Okay.
Well, this is what we'll do. All right. Here's the first step, and since you haven't done it this way before, and I hope you do, because I've seen some of the things that you do on your channel, and as if I have a channel, I've seen things you do on your channel, which is a legitimate channel, that might also. Now, if you look on the chat box. See in the chat box there? I want you to copy and paste that onto your Facebook and send it to whoever you've got on your social media, and people will be able to come in and interact and watch.
Okay, I'm not seeing a chat box on mine. Because remember that I'm on my phone because I have my janky computer, my computer camera. So mine is actually an app, but it does not appear to have a chat box. But that's okay because we're going to be doing these again. So just let me orient myself to this one, and then so that I know how it works. And then in the future, we'll be able to continue with with more people.
Gotcha. So this is what we'll do then. I want you to hold on for a quick second while hold on. What I'm going to do is click a few things here. Why don't we do this? While I'm clicking, tell everyone your name and where you are and how I ended up seeing who you are and why you're here. Because they want to know who you are. Everybody knows who I am here. Introduce yourself. Give us and I want the $5 introduction. I want the shiny introduction. I want the introduction that makes you just let everybody know how awesome you are.
Wow. Okay. So how could I resist that? So my name is Vonetta. I'm originally from Alabama, but through a strange course of events, I ended up in Fortaleza, Ceará, Brazil, about 8 or 9 years ago, and I haven't left. I originally, in America, I was a nurse. I also lived in Ireland for 3 years, and I was a nurse there. I didn't like Ireland at all, but that's where I met all the Brazilians that eventually, I guess, attracted me to this place. And in Brazil, I have been an English teacher and have been surprised that if you live somewhere that's basically not Rio or Sao Paulo, it's really easy to make a living as an English teacher here, because there's not a lot of competition for other native speakers, so you just always have clients trickling in. Well, not trickling in, sometimes it's a tsunami.
Did I know you lived in Ireland?
I don't know. Like I don't know. Did I tell you that? Because our first conversation was like one of those round the world conversations. There was so much stuff discussed. But yeah, like I did.
I've got a good buddy of mine, and he is a Brazilian man who learned English in Ireland. So he has the most unique, we'll use the nice word, accent.
That Irish accent. Yes.
His grammar is just fine, but when you listen to him, he has a Sao Paulo Brazilian Irish accent, which you don't come across that too often.
Yeah, like Ireland. Ireland was actually how I met so many Brazilians. Brazilians love living there. It was very interesting because I hated living in Ireland. I think it's a great place to visit, but like people from hot places don't need to be living in cold places. If you're from a hot place that has good music and good food, you need to know, you need to go to another place with good music and good food, interesting culture.
Well, a lot of my
And
friends tell me they know how good they have it. They understand just how good they have it.
yeah, like in Ireland, I was really surprised because when I was in Ireland, that was before I had really ever known a Brazilian person, shockingly enough. But there are a lot of them in Ireland, and they
What
were
city?
they were the huh?
What city were you in?
I was in Dublin, Ireland, and they were the bright shining star of that place for me. But when I listened to them talk about Brazil, they made it sound like we're still on donkeys. The corruption is I was they the picture that they painted about this place, I was just like, oh, okay, so it's really underdeveloped,
Hey,
dirt
wait, wait,
roads.
which they are we talking about? Are we talking about Brazilians painted that picture or Irish people?
Yes, Brazilians painted that picture, Brazilian
Ooh.
people. And then when I came, yeah, like when I came here, that's it. That is a much deeper issue, though. That I understand more now why so many Brazilians perceive Brazil as being just the worst place on the planet.
Wait,
But
before we hit Brazil, I want to dip into Ireland for me. How you got there? What brought you to Ireland? What brought you to that city? What you did. How long were you there? I don't think we got to that in our first little round the world conversation. But you and I are both full of so many stories that it's hard to catch them all.
okay, so Ireland. When I was about 15 or 16 years old, I actually did an exchange program to Germany, and I lived in Germany for like 3 months. And my exchange partner came to live with me for the same amount of time.
Right?
And being from Alabama, that was the first time that I could see that. Oh my God, you could be in another country in like 8 hours. What? you know. And from that time, it did that original experience gave me a kind of wanderlust. And so, fast forward to being an adult, and I was a travel nurse, so I had already worked in like 5 or 6 states, and I was thinking maybe I could work in another country. And at that time, I didn't have the confidence to go to a country that where English was not the predominant language. And so I saw that there was a nursing shortage in Ireland, and so, yeah, that's how I ended up there. But I just didn't have a good experience there. The culture was too different. The weather was too different. The people, it was difficult for me to interact with Irish people. But the great thing about there is that it's a big immigrant community in Dublin. And so I did make a lot of friends, but not in, like just there were not enough compelling things to make me want to stay there forever.
Wow. And from what I've heard, the food is hearty, but not necessarily diverse.
I don't know who told you that, honey. I disagree. Like, again, I'm a food snob because I'm from Alabama. So we take that very seriously, and yeah, like I didn't have a good food experience from Irish food. There were a lot of like foreign restaurants there that had stuff that was good, but Irish food, potatoes with no salt,
Wow.
that the salt and vinegar fish and chips that are very greasy. I'm like, yeah. I don't want to make Ireland sound too horrible, though. It's a good place to visit, and it's I'm glad that I had the experience. But for me, it just wasn't for me. Brazil was a better fit.
Well, in Ireland, and I don't want to harp on Ireland. What I do want to ask is, I understand business is business, but what was it like socially there?
Yeah, that was a big part of it. At that time, I have friends that are still there that say that it's changed in the last 10 years. But at the time that I was there, Irish people just didn't really socialize that much with people who were not Irish, you know. The social life of different foreign people interacting with each other was good, but overall I felt really limited there because Ireland is an island, you know. So
was Hawaii,
you know,
but I was there and had a great time.
huh?
I said, so is Hawaii, but I lived there and had a great time.
Well, Hawaii and Ireland, come on now. Well, like the thing is about Ireland is that there are a lot of things going against it, you know, as a good place to live. Like the sun is only out like about 2 months in the whole year, you know. The rest of the time is like very gray and dreary, rainy and cold.
Wow.
And then, you know, for a big chunk of the year, the sun goes down at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So there's just a lot of night there. Yes. Yes.
Nobody told me that part.
And then there's like the only thing to do there is really to go drinking. All they have is pubs, you know. They don't really have exceptional restaurants. Occasionally you'll find like a local pub that has like maybe some live music, but just it's just really not compelling enough to make a person like want to, you know, somebody from Alabama, which has so much culture, so much history, so much food and music to go to Ireland, you know.
And how did you meet your first Brazilian friend there?
Yeah, the Brazilians were my shining light. Like you first noticed them because I like coffee shops and writing in cafes and being like that. Everywhere I go, I always find a cafe to be a regular at so that I can start interacting with my environment and the same people regularly, you know. And so, yeah, there was a cafe that I used to go to, and you know, Irish. I would be out there, you know, with my coffee and my gloves and all my clothes on, like writing in my journal, and I would always hear like these big groups of and over time, you just become aware of the Brazilian presence. But then I think one of my first friends was actually one of the guys that worked at the cafe, because that particular cafe was like kind of a gathering point for the same people all the time, you know. And yeah, there tended to be Brazilians there as well, you know. So yeah, like just over time, that's where I met them. And my best friend Alex was like, "Oh, well, have you ever been to South America?" And I was like, "No, I'll go." And when when I got to Fortaleza, it was like love at first sight.
So have you always been in Fortaleza?
Yeah, well, for the first 3 months that I came here, because I wanted to have kind of like a contrast between the Northeast and the Sao Paulo thing. I did have a friend in the Sao Paulo state in a small city called Caçapava, which is close to Taubaté. That I just wanted a different experience just to compare the two places. So I went down there for like 3 months and lived there. But I liked it there. But yeah, it definitely didn't like steer my spirit the way that Fortaleza does. You know, I think here is because it's real hot here. You can be outside a lot, and you know, people here they just have a tendency to smile a lot. It's not a perfect place, you know, because there are downsides to living here or in Brazil in general as well. But definitely the pros far outweigh any cons that I've seen living here.
Wow. That's.
And how about you? Like, what brought you to Brazil?
Well, my story is a little shorter. I like to just travel from different countries, one to the other. I've lived here in São Paulo, Brazil for 3 years. And before that, I was in Shanghai, China for 2 years. Yeah, Shanghai, China for 2 years. It's a long, sordid tale. But I've lived in a lot of different places. Brazil. I train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You can probably see my humble blue belt behind me, which I don't get to train as much as I'd like to because I run a couple of different business business things here. I am someone who does a lot of weightlifting, which is good because I can do that at any time, whereas Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is something I have to go to class for.
Yes. But why did you, like, why have you been here for 3 years? Like, why, what is it that keeps you here?
Well, I'll tell you what, I was born in Niagara Falls, New York, okay? Where it's very cold, where it is winter lasts, I guess, 9 months a year, if you ask me. Okay. I've never lived any place cold again. I went to college in Rhode Island, and then again in New Mexico, but I don't do the whole go cold places thing. It's not for me.
I actually don't feel, it's crazy. I actually don't think that Black people belong in cold places. I feel that, and this is just intuitive, physiologically, something about our physiology does not does not gel well with cold places. Because, you know, I don't know if y'all have it up north, but down south we have that joke that Black people are always cold, you know, and and we always seem to be much more sensitive to cold than other people. So yeah, I think that there is something to our physiology that makes us less adaptable to cold weather, you know.
For me, I just use the word like. I don't like cold weather. I never have.
I think that there is something to our
I've never enjoyed cold weather. I've never enjoyed snow. Snow is cute because some people get to see it for a little while and then they get to leave and they don't really understand that it destroys lives. I mean, I lived in a place where, you know, listen, I'm not trying to exaggerate here. What I can tell you is this. In my life, I lived in a place where you could go outside. Let me back that up. You have to go to work one day. You have to turn your car on a half an hour before you leave. Let's say on your way to work, you stop, have coffee at a cafe, which isn't going to happen, the icy roads. You stop at a cafe, you meet someone interesting, and you say, hey, let's get together Saturday. You have to really like that person because Saturday it might be really cold. You have to keep a 50-pound bag of ice in your trunk. Why? Because what if the tires get stuck somewhere?
No.
Small things like that that just make all the difference in the world. It's
no, it's a big no. It's a no-go.
I never liked it. I left it. Also, Niagara Falls is a great American tragedy, unfortunately.
Why? Why is that?
Niagara Falls, New York is, have you ever heard of something called Love Canal?
No, I haven't.
Love Canal, I'm going to give you the short, abbreviated, awful version. Love Canal is a place where the federal government shoved a lot of toxic waste, paved it over, sold it to low-income people cheaply. The Love Canal scandal caused decades and decades of immediate health problems. People's genetics were changed. Everyone in Niagara Falls knows someone who died of a strange cancer. It's a cancer cluster. And I'm leaving a note here to also in the notes to put in Love Canal.
Okay.
People who want to investigate it a little bit more deeply. Everyone I know knows someone who died early. Something you don't know until you leave Niagara Falls, New York. Now, here's something interesting. Most people don't know that you shouldn't know this many people with cancer, lung disease, strange disease. Seems normal to you until you leave, and then you realize all of a sudden.
Wow! So you knew a lot of people with cancer then.
Yeah. Oh, to this day. Remember, this is within. I think it's just within our lifetime. This is definitely within our lifetime. This is not something different or strange. This is totally normal. This is something that has happened and consistently happens.
Yeah, I know that all around America, this type of thing tends to happen. Basically, you know, rich areas, rich Caucasian areas, you know, they tend to have the best land and they tend to have the power to sort of block those toxic things. Right. And yeah, like it just usually falls in the poor areas. I've heard of things like that, like the Flint. I'm still trying to figure out why Flint still has a water crisis, like after 3 or 4 years, things like that. And I have heard of other cancer clusters, as you call them, around the United States as well. That's very sad.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. It's one of those. It's not an accident. I'm fortunate that and I say this as a strong 41-year-old, I managed to escape a lot of it. I didn't come out harmed. I left home. My parents made sure that, and this is difficult for me, but my parents made sure I got out early. They did everything they could. My family wasn't rich. It was just a matter of they knew that if I could, quote unquote, get smart enough, if I could get good enough grades, I could get out. And
yeah, one of the interesting things about people everywhere is that sense that they can't leave a place. Because we hear about that all the time. They get out, like they knew I could get out. But what does that really mean? Because for me, to get out means to get on a bus and go to a new place, and start from scratch. Why do you think it's so difficult for people to leave, even when the conditions are very bad? Because I know that's one of the things that we're actually going to discuss today is like not being overly reliant on your own tribe, which is something that absolutely fascinates me.
well, let's get into it then. If we're talking about why some people have to leave, I'll tell you I had a couple of advantages. One of my advantages was I'm an only child. I have relatives, friends, cousins, some close, some far, that could have left, but unfortunately had a younger sibling that they had to take care of.
Yes.
And by had to take care of, I mean they had to be in a situation where if they left, even if it was for their own good, they would be leaving someone they loved behind.
Yes, that's true.
And that's a hard thing to deal with.
So yeah, I can see that. If you have the sort of luxury of sort of being free of attachments, I guess, or things that require your immediate attention, then you have the luxury of saying, okay, I'm just gonna go and try to make it somewhere. One of the things that's interesting to me, though, as well, is that a lot of people, because I'm always reading about, like poverty in California, people living in tents, and people not having money to escape disaster areas and stuff like that, and I still try to do the math, because I'm like, well, like, again, how much does it really cost to get a bus ticket, And then when I look at different areas to live, I'm like, New York and California, honestly, they're not made for everybody. But if you went, to somewhere in a flyover state, a small town somewhere where you can have like a 2-bedroom apartment working in McDonald's, because the cost of living just is not that high. I always wonder why everybody feels like they have to live in a huge metropolis. And those are the only options to have like this big expensive life, And why are we so unwilling to start at level 1?
Also, do you understand that you and I, it took me a long time as I rapidly approach maturity to really get to this. You and I represent the end of the curve. You and I represent that part of the curve where, how old were you when you left, by the way? When you left the United States for the first time, how old were you?
The very first time I was I think I was 15 when I went to Germany.
Exactly. My first trips out of the United States, my dad was definitely not traveling because he had done the Navy bit before I was born, which is a whole different story. But get this, you and I, at a very early age, had access to understanding there was a greater world.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
it. We just knew that there was a bigger world out there and that we might be able to access it.
And that you're just not that you're not just quote unquote stuck in just one place.
Exactly. Exactly.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was saying that we're kind of nomads too. So I do acknowledge that you know, nomadic people, we are we are strange people, I guess, in the world. You know.
You have any siblings?
Huh?
You have siblings.
Yes, I have one brother, and he's like kind of the same way. But you know, we were the same as you, I guess. Our parents, we were really fortunate to be. It was like it's like a combination of perfect conditions. You know, fortunate enough to be to grow up in like a very small but well-moneyed town. Tuscaloosa, Alabama has like a huge university. It has an HBCU and it has a community college. Plus, it has like it has like oh, that German car. It has a car plant. I can't think of the name. Mercedes.
Volkswagen?
There, huh?
Volkswagen?
Mercedes plant. Yeah. So but then like when I was growing up, at the same time that there are all of these things that bring money to that small town, population is relatively small. The population at that time was like 75, 80,000 people, you know. Now it's like it's barely at 100,000, you know. So that I would say that is like a huge thing, not living in a densely populated area where everybody's like struggling a lot for resources and at the same time having a lot of resources available, you know.
And see, Niagara Falls, New York isn't densely populated, but it is a city. And it's one of those situations where it's small, but it was a little densely populated, but everybody knew everyone else. And it was hard because as I grew up, and I'll tell you something here and now in front of all these people that a story that no one's ever heard. You know, you ask about us being able to get out. Something my parents told me that my mother and father got divorced. So I forgot who told me first. I verified it with the other one. When my parents got divorced, my dad moved around the corner.
Yes.
They weren't like angry divorce, to the best of my knowledge. But here's a testament to them. If they were angry divorced, I never knew it. They never got into my world.
Angry divorce.
It was one of those things that they told me something, and my mom felt guilty, but not guilty for it. But she felt it was my mother. It was my mother. It wasn't a divorce, by the way. It's what she told me, and I'll share this with you. I came back on break from university, and something you can relate to, and other expats can relate to. It's hard once you've seen a little bit more. You want to share it with other people, but if they've never seen it, it's not a big deal to them. Exactly. And my mother told me something, and this is what tells me about my mother who said it first. She said that she and her father worked hard throughout my childhood, especially my teenage years, to make sure I was never able to be liked by or get along with the rest of my family or cousins. That they made sure the way I dressed, the things I saw, that I was a complete outcast because they never wanted me to be attached to anyone so that I wouldn't leave.
Okay, so this is actually a big issue, I think, definitely for Black people in general, but especially Black Americans. You know, is exactly that. Our tendency to want to do things exclusively with other Black people to the absolute negation of the wider world. What do you think about that mentality? Is it something that helps or hurts us?
Exclusivity hurts. Unfortunately, as Black people anywhere in the world that I've been, just in my experience in the countries that I've lived in, we don't have the luxury of being exclusive.
Yes.
No, there's no situation that you can be in where you don't have to learn how the dominant culture, white culture, however you want to put it, I have to know how you think, act, behave in order to succeed.
Yes, you hit on something really interesting there, because definitely since I've lived outside of the country, our divide that we have in America, I actually have begun to perceive it a lot as tribalism rather than just racism, although it is racism too, but underlying that racism is an extreme tribalism that I have actually observed in a lot of different places. Like one of the most surprising things to me was when I lived in Ireland and I saw how Europeans, like how tribal Europeans were. Like British people didn't like Polish people. Polish people didn't like these people. These people didn't like those people. They were all the same color. Like they all look European to us, but within Europe, yeah, like you see classism there.
What accents you have?
Yeah, like I was really surprised that Polish people are kind of like the lowest rung, or one of the lowest rungs on the ladder. I was really surprised at how people saw them and how much they could be discriminated against in some places.
But now here's the question, and the internet changes the world in a way that we're still analyzing. We're just still in the nascent beginning stages. How do we define pride? This is the interesting part, because in the past, it was easy to look at someone's clothing to identify their ethnicity and religion and their skin. Now, you may meet someone who says, yeah, I happen to be whatever. I'll use people in my world. I have so many friends that are Black, just like you or I, yet if you ask what tribe or what they are, well, they're gamers. Or because of the world that I live in, a huge number of my friends, well, I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player. If you ask who they are and what they do, they don't tell you their name, they don't tell you their religion, they don't tell you their job. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player. My goal is to go to tournaments and win. I have friends who say, well, I'm a gamer. My goal is to make it to the World BlizzCon, blah, blah, blah. And it never occurs to them that their tribe is something that they were born as opposed to something that they worked hard to be accepted into.
Well, exactly. Defining, well, there are, you know, being black on the planet, you know, it is a tribe. Being a Black descendant of slaves in America, we are a tribe, you know. So there is something that gives me a lot of pride in that. And, you know, as I've traveled, it's been very interesting to see how people all over the world, you know, how much interest they have in Black Americans, Black American history, Black American culture, Black American music and food, you know, like I was
about tribes that I learned traveling the world. I've often gone places, even within countries that are normal countries, they would say, well, don't go there because they don't like foreigners and they don't like Americans. The first thing you learn as a Black person traveling is
you're different. Yeah, you're a different American.
No one looks at me, the face of the person who pressed the button on the bomb that hit their country. It just doesn't happen that way. No one looks at me and wants that. It's a very interesting thing to see.
Yeah, like you know, Black American descendants of slaves. One of the things that I wish more Black Americans understood, you know, was basically just how much influence our culture has on the entire planet, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a weird thing to say, but I didn't start seeing that until I left America and started traveling. I started seeing that, yes, American privilege is a thing. I think I talked to you a little bit about how people, especially in Brazil, they can tell the difference between an African person and somebody who isn't African, you know. So as where some of my African friends have faced certain types of discrimination, I've just been free of it, you know, because they can look at me. Some people think that I am Brazilian from Bahia, you know. And also just it's difficult to explain. Like there is because I think a lot of people around the world, they've had more access to white Americans, for example, you know, and white Americans, they can unfortunately they can often have like a kind of a way of being in places where they just kind of remain clueless, you know. Whereas black people, we don't have the luxury of just being able to walk around and with our eyes closed with this idea that the American military is going to come save us you know, if we screw up, you know. So
Exactly.
the way that we navigate the world is, I think, in two different ways. Because I've often seen like white Americans as well, and I see them, and I'm like, there they are, very American, you know.
You know what? In some ways, consider this: there is an envy to not being part of a group that doesn't have to be aware of the way they are perceived.
Yes, yes, but as I've gotten older, though, like I can see that, you know, basically living as a Black person in America and constantly having to adapt to other people, constantly having to, you know, learn, well, how do they sound, how do they speak, you know, how do they do things, what are their mannerisms, you know. And we were learning, you know, a lot of us learned, quote unquote, code switching, you know, just unconsciously if we were around a lot.
I was never allowed to learn that as a child. You know, to give you a little bit of background, you asked about what got me into a position to be able to travel.
Yes.
My first memories with my mother were of her reading to me. And even before I knew what a word was, she would read a word and then I would try to read a word. My father, as I grew older, put books in my hands that were far above my level. So I didn't know that at 12 that maybe reading Plato was a little difficult. I had no idea. I didn't know until I was in high school that my mother saw that I could read 3 grade levels ahead my entire life. I didn't know that my father was giving me college university books when I'm 12, 13, 14 years old. However, I also had the advantage of a grandmother who was retired by the time I was born, who taught me public speaking. I have a list, but I didn't have the resources to go to a professional to deal with it. So my grandmother had me doing professional speaking, reading poems, reciting prose, reading chapters of books, pronouncing words. And I was never allowed to learn code switching. I had to speak clear, correct, consistent English 100% of the time, without exception or else.
I grew up in that type of family too, but you know, my family, the reason that I use the word code switching is because, like, even if you have a family that's like, all right, you're going to learn the right language, you know, or you're going to learn this language because Ebonic, you know, it's crazy because after being an English teacher for 8 years, I actually do see Ebonics, or African American Vernacular English. I do see it as a separate language, you know, and I do consider it like basically a second language. And when we talk about, you know, Black people learning English, you know, rather than considering like our vernacular to be like broken English and all this mess, is not. It's like it is its own dialect, it's its own language, you know. And so I would definitely like put it in terms of learning African American vernacular English, but also learning standard English, you know.
Well, then you and I would just have to fight.
The thing is that everywhere on the planet, and this was also a surprise, the way you speak is like it does everything. You know, how do I explain this? Like, even in Brazil, people that don't speak perfect Portuguese, or at least here in Fortaleza, that there is a way that people who are from one class speaks that people who are from another class are not able to speak, you know. And it does like act as a kind of barrier, you know. Accents are also a thing, you know, because a lot of people are, you know, they're like, well, how did you lose your Southern accent, you know? And I didn't lose it. I just put it away while I'm not in Alabama, you know.
I have a relative with a PhD from the South. I have a relative with a PhD from the South who wrote a paper. This paper got noticed by a few different universities and publications, and they said, listen, we want you to come in and do an hour talk about this paper you wrote. He said, I would love it. They set everything up, and then they called him to confirm. They heard his Southern accent. It all went away.
Like really strong. I mean, and that is a thing, like really strong, like people from a lot, you know, like a lot of white people from Alabama kind of talk like he is real slow, you know, and whatnot, you know. And of course, Black Americans, we have our own distinct way of speaking, which I love, you know, because it's our language. Like one of the best parts of English in general is Black English, you know, all the slang that comes into English, all of the attitude, all of the spice that's in the language. Make no mistake, honey, it comes from us. You know,
The thing that you learn, I spent a good chunk of one of my other careers as a financial professional for about 9 years. My mentor was a wildly successful financial mind, and he was a successful Black American, and he mentored me in business and gave me a good chunk of the skills that made me successful in that business and the businesses that I've run subsequently. Here's the interesting part. He sat me down one day. He said, listen, we need to talk about the way you dress. I said, what are you talking about? I'm wearing a regular suit, just like everybody. He said, this is the problem. You and I can get away with wearing things other people can't. Wear some flash color in your tie. Wear some shiny cufflinks. That's what changed my entire wardrobe. But then he said something to me interesting. He says, you do realize that a lot of your clients become your clients because they're terrified of you and they've never seen a Black person as well presented, well researched as you are, with the professional accreditations you have, and they'll give you more credit for having done the same job. And it really didn't stick with me until one of my older clients who has a lot of money, it was down between me and a guy from Merrill Lynch to manage part of his portfolio. And
yes,
it was a war. And he sat me down and says, I'm going to go with you, young man. He's old, white hair. I said, okay. And as I'm doing my paperwork, feeling good about myself, I said, well, what made you pick me? Because I'm awesome. And he says, well, you're Black. I was like, He said, well, you probably had to do a lot more work to get where you are than the other guy, so you probably know more. You can make me some more money.
Yeah, like it's this weird paradox that I'm still trying to understand. You know, somebody has explained it before, but I have forgotten the whole theory. But I've experienced it too. Like when you have like a very strong proximity to only other Black people, it seems like your chances or whatever, they seem to decrease a lot. But once you start moving away from that tribe based upon only race, you know, and start moving into other areas, you don't have to abandon your Blackness. You don't have to abandon all of that or anything like that. But putting yourself, diversifying who you are, diversifying.
Why do so many people associate poverty with that part of their tribe that they're proud of? I wrote.
Say that again. I didn't understand. Say that again.
Too many people put poverty as part of who they are. I wrote something once, and I'll link to it as well. I wrote poverty.
Well, hold on a second, because that's the other thing is that, like, if you look at the statistics, I think it's still a high percentage of Black people compared to other races that are in poverty. But like at least 75% of Black Americans are middle and at least at the middle class level. But the only story that we hear is that, yeah, we're all poor. You know, we're all poor. None of us have any, any opportunities and all of this, you know, and also those stories of triumphant poor Black communities. We never hear those stories. Occasionally we'll hear them. But somehow, like, we just all became Southside Chicago, you know.
Well,
and I don't know how it happened.
I wrote an article, a few words once, called "Poverty is Not a State of Mind," and it said poor people forge alliances based on race, religion, and location. Not poor people forge alliances based on education level and income, and they're constantly trying to improve both. And you learn very, very quickly. You know, I learned very, very quickly because I had the fortune to be in an industry that let me work with a lot of very successful people.
Yes.
You learn very quickly that the differences are so much more than financial. And how do we get away from that?
Yes. Yes. I'm still trying to put a finger on it, you know. But when I go into like the I don't know, for me this is like both a spiritual and a physical world concept. We know that organisms that are extremely diverse, you know, genetically, those are the strongest organisms. Those are the ones that can survive anywhere. And organisms that are genetically weak, they're the ones that die. You know, they're the ones that are like, they die from influenza and stuff, you know. The same can be true for physical people with the most, I would even say the most skills, but the highest degree of fast adaptability, you know, being able to be put in a situation, but also having a thick enough skin that you can weather certain storms without it absolutely breaking you down, or
Right.
knowing that, okay, I don't have to be here, you know, like not allowing pride to keep you in a situation that's not good for you, and keeping that mind open, that, you know, again, places like America is freaking huge, you know, and we don't need passports to travel within it like Europeans used to need, you know, to travel within their continent. You know, it's a huge place, and you don't have to be in one place. You can try your hand in another place, even though it can be scary. So like that adaptation alone, and all of the things that come with having to adapt, you know, the more adaptations you make in life, the sooner you begin to see, like, oh, you know, I am this, and I don't need to even deny that I'm this, but I don't have to be limited by being that as well, you know.
A second ago, you said something, and I wanted to get into this, even though it's not where you are now.
Nobody wants to get their Negro wake-up call at the wrong moment, so you do have to respect.
Oh, you have to explain Negro wake-up call.
What do you say?
A lot of people listening might not know.
The Negro, okay, so the Negro wake-up call means basically is for Black people who think that they have escaped their Blackness, you know. The Black people who, you know, maybe they live in a white community, maybe they are well-traveled, maybe they speak 10 languages and got some money, and they forgot they were Black, you know. And then, you know, of course, something in the world will happen to remind them, like, you know, like, you Black. You know, you can never forget that you do carry this skin, and in fact that there is no reason to want to escape your Blackness, you know, that it is one of the most powerful things that we have, you know. But we also have to respect the fact that there are certain precautions that go with being a Black person on the planet, you know. There are precautions, because we live in a world right now that fears us, you know. So we do. The world is. I remember the moment that I began to realize that underneath all of that hate is fear. Is during the times of Ferguson. I remember reading a study that like this study basically interviewed lots of people, and the results of the study showed the whole, like that we really are seen as magical Negroes. We are really seen as people that can run through bullets, that do not feel pain,
Right.
that are more aggressive, because culturally we are more direct. So people who are not direct like that, they think it's aggressive, you know. Because, you know, for us, it's really easy for us to say, I don't like you, get out of my life, I don't like what you did, you know. For them, they're accustomed to hiding things in closets, not talking about it for thousands of years. That's why you got all that sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. That's another issue, you know.
Yeah, I had a friend who wanted to be a priest, and he's not now because of the stigma. He said, you know, in his family, every now and then there are a few men who went to the priesthood, and he really felt his calling. He was a real believer. I'm an atheist, but I've always respected his thoughts. And he told me that his was the first generation where people in his family were like, we know you're a good guy, but do you want to carry that stigma?
Well, it's crazy because the Catholic Church is like really fascinating. It's not, it isn't based at all on Christianity. It's like a pagan religion with Christian things like surrounding it. But when I was reading about why are there priests celibate? You know, because in the Bible, like the apostles had families, you know. The priests are the only reason that the priests are celibate is so that they don't have families that can inherit any of the Catholic Church's wealth. That is the only reason. Now it's hidden in like doctrine and all of this stuff. But yeah, the Catholic Church is like rich. The Vatican is like the smallest country, full of gold and riches and secrets, I guess. And yeah, like I think your friend is definitely doing much better not being associated with that mafia or organization.
Wow.
That's another, but that's for another time.
Earlier, you mentioned something, and perhaps you mentioned it in the terms that you normally deal in. You said organisms that adapt. What made you walk away from being a nurse? What kind of nurse were you, by the way?
I was an ICU nurse, and I loved being it. The thing is that moving to Brazil, I just didn't have the language skills to be able to be an ICU nurse here, you know, because when you start learning a language after the age of 30, there is a constant war between your mother language, which forms a big chunk of who you are as a person, and that other language. People think that it's really easy. People think, oh, well, you live there, so it'll all come naturally, you know. But in reality, it takes a lot of time to learn a new language. And so, yeah, I had to do something, you know, while learning the language. And so, of course, you know, I have friends that told me, yeah, like they have language schools there, so you could do that, you know. And so I gave up nursing and started at a low-paying English school here. But I was so happy that I did it because I learned so much. Because a big part of being successful in places like Brazil is really understanding the culture, you know, like having a deep understanding of how people think, what they want, how they like things, you know, how they communicate with each other. So, you know, working at that school for 2 years, like, gave me that, you know. But then I began to realize that, yeah, people would pay me to come teach them at their house, at their company, you know. They would just, you know, a lot of them just, they wanted a native speaker, so to speak, than maybe a Brazilian teacher in a school. And I don't think I mentioned before how huge classism is and how it permeates every single aspect of society, at least here in Fortaleza. So I also.
But how is class not the same in America?
It's not. Like in America, Americans typically are not completely terrified of leaving their own neighborhood. Like if you live in an American city, you might know that you're driving through a bad part of town, for example, and you'll just get on through there, but you don't feel like, oh, I would never like go to a restaurant there. You know, oftentimes you'll see like the Mark Zuckerbergs going into like a little hole in the wall fish place on the bad side of town because they got the best fish, you know. Here you don't see that. And here, like it's how to explain it. Like every single aspect of society here, from the way that people talk, from the way that they dress, from who they're associated with, there's an undergirding of class mixed into it, you know. You see, like, so for
I'm gonna put this in the comments of the YouTube. There was a great Cracked article about class in the United States, because we do have class warfare. It's different, but it's there, and it's the difference is. Here, you're right. I will freely admit that it is greater here, but a lot of people don't realize that in the United States, we have, you know, this horrible class warfare as well.
We do. It's one of, like, in these last elections, I was witnessing a lot of that on the internet. You know, like there's you know, there's a segment of Black people who feel like, okay, well, what was ever done there's this sort of, I call it a kind of extremist thinking that America is like no different than it was during slavery, that nothing has ever been done ever for Black people, that Black people have never, ever, ever benefited from anything, that if white women benefited from affirmative action, then that just somehow made it null and void for the Black people who also, who also, you know, benefited from affirmative action, which I can say I have benefited from affirmative action, that kind of thing, and like and don't vote, you know. But when I talk to people and say, well, why wouldn't you vote? Like it's like this repetition of like catchphrases, but it's not deep thought, you know. The most common thing is like, well, what has the government done for us? What if they you know, like until they give us something that they're not giving anybody else, we shouldn't vote, you know. But then if you ask, well, what is it that you want specifically, you know, most are not able to say specifically, what would you ask for, you know? What is your agenda? What would you like the government to give you? You know, something that's not reparations, you know, because that would take years and years of a fight, you know. Reparations, I actually think that we do deserve reparations, but that's something that's going to take like you know, like a big concerted, focused, and probably ongoing effort by the right people to get that, you know. So something other than reparations, what is it that we want, you know, that the federal government can do for us that our local governments can't? And usually they're not able to answer, you know, so that's really disturbing to me.
That's the thing. People don't really have a what do you want? Because the reality is, and this is part of where I am, help's not coming. Help's not coming.
Exactly.
You know, someone said in the Black Expats in Brazil group, which I'll happily link, that where is it? Basically, it was is it unsafe for Black people in Brazil? And I said, I've lived in 15 countries and there is no safe place for us. Wherever you are, you have to bunker down with who you know, what you can learn,
yes,
and go from there. There is no safe space. Help's not coming.
Yeah. Exactly. So understanding that, you know, then what can we do after that? You know, understanding that help isn't coming, because one of the really positive things that I've seen, and again, you're not going to see a lot of media coverage of this, but you do see, you are beginning to see, you know, since schools are dangerous for our children, for example, a lot of Black people are choosing to homeschool their children, you know, instead of just keeping their children in a dangerous school system. They're like, yeah, there is something I can do. I'm seeing a lot more Black local farmers, you know, people learning to live off the land. There is, like right now, there is still an aversion to many Black people learning trades. But I, you know, for any of my friends and family, I always tell them, learn a trade before you go get that English degree. Learn how to do plumbing, because you're never going to be out of work. You know, nursing is a trade. You know, it's a trade that is needed.
It's interesting when you talk about a trade. I have a friend who just ended up having a conversation with me about her career as an English teacher in different countries, because something a lot of people don't know is that in every country where you teach English, no matter where that country is, you earn a middle to above middle class income.
Yes,
and a lot of people don't know that. She said something to me. She said, I teach learning how to teach English as a trade.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought about that.
Exactly. Yeah, teach it like anything that is not just a purely intellectual pursuit. I consider a trade, you know. Anything that allows you to fix something that is broken, or put pieces of something together, you know, it's a trade, you know, something. And the trade, I also consider trade to be something that's actually needed, you know. Like one of the things that surprised me about Brazil is that a day cleaner this is crazy. A person that cleans houses daily here actually makes a lot more money than a cleaner in America does. So
wait, how do you get that?
It is crazy. It's crazy. Like here, because there is a shortage of people people that clean houses and watch kids, because the population, there's more money circulating in the population now, so they have much fewer people to do things like raise their children and clean houses, you know. And also those domestic workers recently got their rights, so they're more expensive now as well. So now, like, they're called diaristas, and a day cleaner can go and a day cleaner can go and basically earn like 100, anywhere from 120 to 150 reais per day, you know, in an 8-hour time frame. And that basically sums up, it comes out to like 16 reais per hour, you know.
Well, here's the thing though, where I am, and I don't know about you, but where I am, they don't get paid very much. They get paid, but when you look at the amount of work they have to do, and to be clear, I have my own diarista. I actually mentioned it in my article that I wrote about the expense report. I don't know if you saw that. And what I would like you to do, did you see the expense report I did for Brazil?
Yes. I think that it is very accurate for São Paulo, but it is not accurate actually for the whole country, because it's actually a lot more expensive to live where you live than it is to live here. But it sounded about right for the South.
Yeah, because here we are discussing two totally different cities, and São Paulo is so expensive compared to the rest of the country.
Yes. Hold on one second here. I'm looking at, I'm trying to navigate the Hangout because I'm on my camera. So what is like, it's difficult for me to navigate some of the things, because I'm like, oh, I'm new. I don't know nothing, y'all.
What's happening that you can't see?
Like the messages, the messages come a little bit differently on mine.
No,
okay,
wait,
so hold on, I do see a message from Tiffany, okay? So yeah, okay, so this is interesting. So she's saying that my comment on Southside Chicago is unwarranted. So this is very fascinating. She says that, let me read her comment. Hold on.
And Tiffany, since you're watching this right now, I don't think that you can get into the comments from the app if you're on your phone. You have to actually click and go into YouTube. I would like, even if we address that, leave that question on the right side in the chat so that we can talk about it, even in the future.
Okay, so I don't know how to do that. So I like the way that it's coming up on my thing, I think is completely different than what you're able to navigate on your computer. Like you're able to do much more complex things than I am on my phone.
Yes.
Well, so yes, like so try not to leave me things that have to be opened or read or anything like that, because it's really difficult for me to do on this. And in the future, I'll get another camera for my computer, you know, besides my computer camera, because like on my phone, like it's really difficult to navigate between different windows.
Well, this is what
I am seeing a comment from Tiffany though, and I think it's a really interesting. She's basically saying that the story that they're telling about Southside is not correct, which I think is interesting. Why is Southside you know, such a focus for like, oh, there's just everybody, you know, like killing everybody every weekend in Southside. That's all that happens there. Why is that such a strong narrative? And I think that's really fascinating. She's from there.
Well, you know what? There are two things. One, you said that you don't have as many controls as I do, which is absolutely correct. I have a lot of things, and when you're here, don't worry about those. I only want you to focus on talking. When we do your show, I'll show you how to do all the behind, because when you see me typing, it's because I'm telling people, hey, leave the question there.
Sorry, y'all. Like whoever's watching this, I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Don't worry about it. I might have a surprise for you coming in a second. So what I will do, though, is I do want to address, when you and I give our opinion, it's only our opinion.
Yes.
You know, we can only get the benefit of what we've seen. Now, if people have a counter narrative, we can all talk about it respectfully and have a big disagreement and still be friends and family afterwards. That's okay.
Yes. Yes. I agree with that 100%.
Let me ask her a quick question since she's not on the on the chat. So, by the way, so you said the reason you didn't go into nursing was because of the language barrier. Is that something you'd ever want to go back into?
Only in the United States. When I worked because I worked as a nurse in Ireland, like the United States, like I worked at UAB Hospital in Birmingham, Alabama. I mean, and it's like the Cadillac of hospitals. You know, that was where I got all of my training, and then I went to different states and cities as a travel nurse. You know, and the organization and technology and overall staff that we have at our well-funded hospitals, you know, like nobody else has that. You know, when I was in Ireland, I didn't enjoy nursing there because I don't know, they still have these kind of old attitudes about nursing. The role of nurses was different there. And I didn't like it as much because there were not as many men. There were not as many male nurses there. Because for me, it's always been very difficult for me to work only with women, although I do like working with women, but working only with women with no masculine energy has always been difficult for me. So it's one of the things that I loved about critical care nursing in the United States is that, you know, during a certain era, you know, men started coming into ICU and emergency room nursing in larger numbers because you can make more money in critical care, you know, whereas in Ireland, no. And Irish nurses also, they were not comfortable because it was pretty obvious at that time that there were not enough Irish nurses in that hospital, you know, and that over time foreign nurses would take them over, you know, and they just didn't have the best attitude. Huh?
Were they from the Philippines mainly?
There were Filipino nurses and African nurses, those two places. And they, I don't know, I just didn't like their system there, you know. I also did a medical mission in Eritrea, Africa, the country that's very close to Ethiopia. You know, and the hospitals there, of course, were definitely not as well developed. And here as well, like in Brazil, you know, nurses are still fighting for rights and recognition and stuff like that. So for me, I'm like, I can't.
Well, okay, you opened up something that I really wanted to get into when you talked about your mission. First, what is your mission? What is a mission in Eritrea?
I mean, it's a medical, it was called Physicians for Peace. And I participated in that. I think it was like, 2006, 2007, something like that. And we, basically a team of doctors and nurses, we went to Eritrea with our own products, like with the doctors, you know, the doctors brought like surgical equipment, correctional equipment, all this stuff. And basically this team did free surgeries in Eritrea for like 2 weeks, you know?
Hold on. We have a winner.
What?
We are going to have, hold on now. Let me get this going. Let me press a few buttons here. We are going to have our friend representing Southside Chicago. She wants to come in and help us understand some of what's going on.
Oh, please, please. Yes. Make it happen. Is this Tiffany?
Hold on.
Yes, please make that happen. How many people are watching us?
It says 5, but I don't think that counts because I announced this in a few different groups. Who cares? Some people will watch it now. Some people. I'm having a good time. I don't care who's watching.
But that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. 5 people.
You know, I call my mom and have her put a thumbs up if I need to.
No, but that's really awesome. We have people watching us and participating.
And you know what? Good. and we're having a good conversation. Let's see if she clicks in. So hopefully she'll be able to click in a minute. I sent her the link, and hopefully she'll be able to pop on and say hello.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, like I definitely, because that's another thing is that while we hear all of this crazy stuff about Chicago, like every weekend thousands of people are dying. You know, like you're like, how is that possible? You know, and what? And then Chicago, you know, south side of Chicago has just become this like this catchphrase, like all people everywhere live there, and that literally every weekend, you know, like 10, 20, 30 people are just being shot and killed. And yeah, like it's always sounded like something that was maybe unlikely, but how can you know if you don't live there?
Let's see. Let's see if she wants. She may not. I don't know. I just put the offer out there.
We're approaching my time that I have to go. We are almost. I can stretch it. It's like 1:19 here, and I can stretch it to 1:45, and then I must go. Okay.
Well, then let's do this.
That'll give me 25 minutes.
Let's at the very least get to one of the cruxes of the issues that we dealt with. You want to talk about the way healthcare is handed out here as opposed to other places.
Say that one more time, please.
Remember when we talked about healthcare? We talked about, because I'll tell you my side of it, because we also talked about something we wanted to say about medical care in Brazil versus medical care in the United States. Wait, what are you? Is that? What are you doing? What are you doing? Is that you? What are you doing? Is that your computer?
It's not me.
Did you just press?
I thought that was Tiffany.
No, she's not in. She hasn't replied yet. I gave her the option. Did you just press like the church button on your computer or something?
Oh, I thought that was Tiffany coming in saying, "Whoa!"
I have no idea what's happening. In any case, we talked about healthcare, and
okay, yeah.
I'll give you my side because I want to give the layman side before we hear from someone who's nuanced in healthcare as a professional. I get a checkup every 6 months, no matter where I go, no matter what I do. Once a year, I get a small checkup, simple blood work, simple blood pressure, blah, blah, blah. Then once a year, I get the full, I want a flashlight up my behind, blood work, everything. And I'm healthy, I'm strong, I'm doing great.
Yes.
One of the things that I talk about with my friends when they come from the US and they're like, oh, we're going to come to Brazil, we're going to hang out, we're going to eat all this Brazilian food, and it's going to be awesome. I say, oh yeah, Saturday we're gonna get up early. We're gonna get up at about 7. They say, okay, but why? I'm gonna take you to the doctor. To the doctor? Yeah. Most Americans don't have access to a world where I go to a private clinic where for less than $100 US, I can get a full checkup. And it blows their mind to know that there are places in the world where where an average working man can simply afford to go to a regular doctor. And what's interesting is you find out traveling, it's not that there are only a few countries like that. It's that in most of the developed civilized world like Brazil, poor, rich, it doesn't matter. You know what? It's okay. You can just go to the doctor.
Yes. Yeah, like it's actually something that I really want to do a video on my channel about is medical tourism,
Yeah, we should definitely link up on that. We should link up on that.
Yeah, like because at this point we have our politicians still trying to take away what little access to healthcare people have. Hopefully they will be able to square away Obamacare, but really what I would like to see is universal healthcare in the United States. And at that surprised the snot out of me when I when I saw, first of all, how relatively cheap, I would say 75% of procedures here are, and if you are somebody with US dollars, and you have something, basically, if you were to save like $5,000 to $10,000, I would say and get a ticket to a place like Brazil, which would cost anywhere from $800 to like $1,000, you know?
Also say it's what you spend in preventative medicine, just to be able to go to the doctor and make sure everything is okay.
Exactly. And in Brazil, at least here in Fortaleza, the way it works is that people with money, because the insurance here is similar to the insurance in the United States, where, you know, like if the stuff is too complex, they start not wanting to cover it and all of that. But if you got just straight up money here, like cash, if you're like, hey, just, you know, give me what I can have, like for example, like a specialist, you know, a specialist here will cost anywhere from 400 to 600 reais, you know, which would be, you know, like, which in dollars is somewhere between like $75, you know, to like maybe $150, you know, maybe as much as $200 for a highly skilled specialist to give you like the Cadillac of like tests and diagnostic procedures to see what it is that you have, you know. If you need to go to, if you need to go to the radiologist, you know, if you need a sonogram, you know, 600 reais, maybe $100 to $200, you know. MRIs, again, $100 to $200, not like thousands like it is in the United States, you know. Full blood workup, you know, less than 100. I mean, stuff like that. I mean, so like 500. So for like, I don't know, I would say for like $1,000, I mean, you can have like full blood workup, including all the special stuff, a sonogram, an X-ray, an MRI, a CAT scan. You know, like you can have all of those
big stuff you don't even need. But what are we getting?
Like all of those diagnostic procedures for that much, you know. And I mean, medicines here as well. Like they don't have those. They don't have like freaking insulin that costs, you know, $500. As a matter of fact, here in Fortaleza, they have like their quick care clinics, you know, which is their, well, not quick care, but maybe walk-in clinics, you know, for basic stuff. And they have their medical posts, which focus more on things like vaccines, teeth cleaning, you know, eye exams, pre-existing chronic conditions, things like that. I mean, poor areas of town. They're not always perfectly functional because, you know, so well, any medical place doesn't function 100% at all times, particularly if it's not free. But that being said, usually you can go to any of these places. I've been to them before. Like if I want a teeth cleaning, I can get it for free, you know, because poor people don't bother me. You know, I don't feel like, oh my God, there are poor people here, you know.
And that's a very good
exam, I have it for free.
The United States works is it's just a money grab that costs people their lives. I'm fortunate that I've always had insurance, but most people I meet traveling the world, they're always surprised that you have to have a job to have medical care.
Exactly. So yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I've been promoting, sort of like on the low, but now I want to be louder about it, is like, especially for Black people, to consider medical tourism. And it could be, you know, it could be in places like Mexico, Brazil. I think even if they chose to go to Europe, you know, for those procedures, like those procedures that seem necessary, but just so far out. Like if you have something wrong with your body and you just don't have the money to go to a doctor, or you're scared, start socking away like at least $5,000, at least 5,000, you know.
We're going back to a fundamental issue that you and I talked about earlier. We talked about travel. That entire concept of being able to sock away money, you know, as I rapidly approach maturity, and as I got out of my comfort zone, and then as I see the way life developed for me versus some of the people that I love, the entire concept of being able to save money is something that if you don't get into that young, the odds are so low.
Well, something that being in other parts of the world also taught me, for example, is that, you know, people that are not earning that much money, because in America, we think that every single person has to have their own apartment, their own car, and that they're supposed to just be completely independent. But that's just really not how other parts of the world function. You know, like you can have like 2 or 3 families like living in one house in Brazil. You know, even like even rich people. You know, you know, all pooling their resources. If I were, you know, if I were a poor person in America at this point, even though I do have a preference for living alone, if I were poor there, I would definitely be looking to be in a, even at my age, you know, 39, I would definitely be looking at being in some sort of cohabitation situation with friends or people that I know, and basically like at least for 1 year, you know, and severely reducing overall costs, and basically, if at all possible, having money automatically transferred from checking account to savings account and starting there, you know.
Well, this is what we're going to have to do then, because we're going to have to do this again, and we're going to have that cryptocurrency discussion because we weren't able to do it this time.
Yes, the crypto. I told you I go off on tangents. If anybody's still listening, I'm sorry. I have a tangent. Go or offer owner.
Next time we'll do it at your house, on your dime and on your computer. But let's do this. For now, I'm going to tell everybody that I want them to subscribe to your channel. I'm gonna fix this video up a little later. I'm gonna put a bunch of links in it for everybody to be able to follow. I'm glad we do this. Do you think Brazil is for beginners? Do you think this is a place that people can come to if they have never traveled before?
Yes. Like, do you mean just for looking around, or for living, or in what?
As an expat.
Yeah, I think that Brazil is definitely a place to consider. You know, I've had a wonderful time here. My only thing is that Rio and Sao Paulo are not the only places to live. Cost of living is seriously like lower in Fortaleza. Like, you know, like you can have like an apartment that is 1,500 square feet, an old apartment, you know, 1,500 square feet, for example, for like the equivalent of maybe like less than 1,000 US dollars, you know. I mean,
wow.
cost of living, yeah, yes. So, but the main thing is to, like, if you're going to work here, then you need to do something here that earns you, I would say, like more than 5,000 reais. Like in Fortaleza, that seems to be like that magic point, because there are so many poor people here. Those that have like an income that is at least 5,000 reais per month for like 1 to 2 people to live off of. Yeah, like it just seems like there's just access to a lot more stuff here, you know? So yeah, Brazil, though, I did a video about it because it's a video called Brazil is Not for Beginners. Brazil is the type of place that does take study. If you're not going to be specifically in Sao Paulo, which again, I argue that while Sao Paulo is really awesome, there are also a lot of opportunities in other places, but the place does take some time and study, you know.
Yeah.
It's not Canada, Australia, America, you know, England. So you have to get ready to completely change your culture, step into a new place. If you are somebody that's really hyper offended by, you know, like people like telling white lies, because a lot of Brazilians tell little white lies, which they don't consider lying, for example. Don't come here, you know. Or if like governmental corruption is like, oh my God, the government is corrupt, you know, definitely don't go to Brazil. But if you're like somebody that's like entrepreneurial, you would like to try to start something somewhere outside of America, starting small, I would say that there are a lot of opportunities in Brazil, but that it just requires some time on the ground for at least like 6 months for you to like really study and get your sea legs in the place, because it's not the type of place that you can just come to and then just get to work. It's just not set up like that. But I love it here.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So thank you too. And what would you say? What would you say to people?
Oh, absolutely. I think Brazil is for beginners. I think Brazil is a place where, and I can only speak from the big city perspective, if you come here with a marketable skill, and we'll use the random, hey, I teach English, but you are in a place to be paid through Bitcoin or US dollars, you can live well. And by live well, I don't just mean make money. I choose not to sacrifice too much of my time for money. I work a few hours every day. I spend the rest of the time reading for fun, writing for fun, lifting weights. But I'm not in the rat trap of working 9-10 hours every day and making less. I can work fewer hours and save a larger percentage of my income.
Yes. They also have really interesting banking schemes here, like something that I've been looking at.
That's a different conversation.
Okay, I want to talk to you about the Brazilian CDB or CD, which and the
love
Teachology.
you. Goodbye. You're not going to pull me down that rabbit hole.
Okay, so it's for next time. I know, because I'm the one. I wish I had another hour, but yes, we can save it for next time.
Bye-bye, sweetie.
All right, so thank you so much, y'all. I hope whoever's watching, I hope you've enjoyed our little conversation here. And yeah, let's look to do it again soon. Thank you so much. All right.
Bye.
Ciao.